If everything feels like it's falling apart, stop running from the sound. Collapse is not always destruction. Sometimes it is the signal that something false can no longer be held. What feels like loss may be the loosening of what never truly belonged to you in the first place. You may say, I have prayed, I have trusted, and still it unravels. Yet there is a moment when the old structure must fail before the right one can appear. Divine order does not patch what was never meant to stand, it clears the ground for what is real. Think of the hour when you realize nothing you were leaning on feels secure anymore. The plan breaks, the relationship shifts, the money tightens, the future feels blank. That moment feels like danger, but it is often the hand of mercy removing a false support. Most people panic when the familiar falls away. They rush to rebuild the same shape, using fear as mortar. But fear cannot hold anything. What is built in fear must eventually crack, because it was never aligned with your true supply. There is something that holds when everything else fails. Not money, not people, not circumstances. There is a center that does not move, even while appearances shake, and until you lean on that center, life will keep removing substitutes. You may feel as though you are being tested beyond your strength, yet strength is not proven by holding on. It is proven by letting go. When the last illusion drops, you are finally light enough to be carried. Picture a night when sleep will not come. Thoughts circle the same question. What if I lose everything? That question feels terrifying, yet it hides a deeper truth. What if what remains is what you were meant to stand on all along? When things fall apart, it is often because you have outgrown the old arrangement. What once supported you has become too small for the life-seeking expression through you. The breaking is not punishment. It is preparation. Here is the danger of resisting this moment. If you cling to what is collapsing, you collapse with it. But if you release, you discover something beneath you that was always steady, waiting for your trust. Most people try to fix the outer picture first. They scramble for reassurance, explanations, guarantees. Yet peace never comes from rearranging appearances. It comes from shifting your point of reliance. There is a law at work when everything shakes. It is the law that removes what is insecure so the secure may be known. The law that strips away noise so you can hear guidance that has been whispering all along. You may feel alone right now, as though no one understands how fragile things feel inside. But this is often the most intimate moment between you and the unseen. When nothing else answers, the right answer finally has space to speak. Notice what happens when you stop fighting the fall. A strange quiet enters. Not because the problem is solved, but because resistance has ended. In that quiet, clarity begins to rise. Soft at first, then unmistakable. What is meant for you cannot be destroyed by collapse. Only what was never secure is lost. This is why fear lies when it says, you are losing everything. You are losing only what could not last. The shaking reveals where you placed your faith. If it was in form, the form must fail. If it returns to the source never fails. This redirection is the hidden gift inside the breakdown. There comes a moment when you stop asking, how do I fix this? And begin to ask, what is being shown to me? That question changes everything. Guidance replaces panic. Direction replaces confusion. Do not rush to fill the gap. The space created by collapse is sacred. It is the space where new order forms. If you fill it with fear, you delay the answer. If you hold it in trust, the answer moves quickly. What will hold you now is not effort, control, or explanation. What will hold you is alignment. a return to the inner certainty that you are carried, directed, and supplied, regardless of what appearances suggest. Something is being reordered, something stronger is taking shape, and when you stand again, it will not be on what can fall apart, but on what never does. When a man reaches the point where the structure of his life begins to crumble, he is inclined to believe that misfortune has overtaken him. He sees only the breaking of plans, the loss of security, the collapse of arrangements upon which he relied. Rarely does he stop to ask whether the thing that is breaking was ever sound. Yet nature is exact. She does not destroy at random. She exposes weakness where weakness exists, and she does so with a precision that leaves no room for misunderstanding if the man is willing to think. I have studied the lives of thousands of men and women who experienced great achievement, and I have found a curious fact, repeated with astonishing consistency. Before mastery, there was often collapse. Before clarity, confusion. Before direction, drift. What the untrained mind calls failure, the disciplined mind recognizes as revelation. Collapse is not the enemy of success. It is frequently the announcement that a false foundation has reached its limit. Most people go through life in a state of unconscious drift. They are busy, but not directed. They are active, but not purposeful. They mistake movement for progress and effort for achievement. So long as conditions support this illusion, drift remains hidden. But when conditions change, as they inevitably do, the illusion collapses, and the man is forced, often for the first time, to face the nature of his thinking. When everything begins to fall apart, it is rarely because the man has done nothing. On the contrary, it is often because he has done much, but without a central purpose. He has followed opportunity without direction, accepted security without thought, and allowed habit to substitute for vision. Collapse arrives when these borrowed supports can no longer carry the weight of a growing life. I have observed that nature does not permit drift to continue indefinitely. Sooner or later, she intervenes. She withdraws the props. She removes the crutches. She forces a reckoning. This is not cruelty. It is correction. A man who cannot stand alone in thought will never stand securely in circumstance. The majority of men respond to collapse with panic. They hurry to repair appearances. They scramble for reassurance. They grasp at the first opportunity that promises relief, regardless of whether it promises direction. In doing so, they repeat the very error that led to collapse in the first place. They rebuild the same structure, only faster, and then wonder why it falls again. Here lies the great waste of human life, not in failure itself, but in failure misunderstood. I have seen men waste 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years rebuilding from fear, when a short season of thought would have rebuilt their lives from purpose. They were not defeated by circumstances. They were defeated by haste. Collapse is the moment when a man becomes teachable, if he allows it. It is the moment when habit loosens its grip, and thought may, for the first time, take command. Yet this moment is fleeting. If seized, it saves years. If wasted, it multiplies loss. One of the most successful industrial leaders I ever studied experienced a total financial collapse early in life. He lost his business, his reputation, and the confidence of those around him. For a time, he was regarded as finished. Yet instead of rushing to restore appearances, he withdrew into study and reflection. He discovered that he had been reacting to opportunity rather than pursuing a definite aim. When he returned to action, he did so with direction, and his later achievements far exceeded his early success. Contrast this with the man who rebuilds immediately, driven by fear of poverty or ridicule. He accepts work beneath his ability, alliances beneath his standards, and obligations that bind him for years. He tells himself he will adjust later, not knowing that habit, once reestablished, resists adjustment. Thus collapse, instead of freeing him, becomes the doorway into a longer imprisonment. Nature does not punish men for ignorance. She instructs them, but instruction is useful only when it is understood. Collapse reveals where a man's faith was placed. If it was placed in conditions, the conditions fail. If it was placed in habit, habit collapses. Only faith placed in thought, directed thought, survives disturbance. This is why collapse feels so personal. It touches the identity. It strips away titles, routines, and assumptions. The man who believed himself secure discovers that his security was borrowed. The man who believed himself strong discovers that his strength was conditional. This discovery is painful only because it is unfamiliar. At this stage, others watch closely. They observe not the collapse itself, but the response to it. One man becomes erratic, bitter, and desperate. Another becomes thoughtful, composed, and deliberate. Both have lost the same thing, yet one loses respect along with it, while the other quietly gains it. People instinctively trust the man who does not panic. They sense that he is governed by thought rather than circumstance. I have seen men who, though temporarily reduced in position, gained influence simply because they maintained control of their thinking. Their speech became measured. Their decisions became deliberate. They no longer rushed to explain themselves. Others noticed. Opportunity, which avoids confusion, moved toward clarity. At this point, one truth must be clearly understood. Collapse is not the end of effort, it is the end of drift. It is the point at which life demands direction. To meet that demand wisely is to save years of blind trial. There is a law at work here, and it is exact. Every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit, but that seed does not germinate automatically. It requires recognition, faith, and disciplined thought. The man who sees only loss will harvest only loss. The man who looks for instruction will harvest opportunity. I often advise men in this position to repeat quietly until the meaning becomes clear. Every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Another useful declaration is this: I refuse to drift. I choose to think. These words, impressed upon the subconscious mind, begin the rebuilding process at its only proper starting point. Collapse, properly understood, is a gift disguised as inconvenience. It strips away what is unnecessary and exposes what is essential. It asks one question and insists upon an answer. Will you continue to drift, or will you now direct your life with purpose? If this question is answered now, honestly and without haste, years are saved. If it is postponed, those years are paid for in repeated disappointment. Therefore, when everything appears to be falling apart, do not waste the moment. Do not rush to repair appearances. Do not rebuild from fear. Think, reflect, decide. For this moment, rightly used, can save 10 years of wandering and sometimes far more. After collapse has stripped away illusion and forced a man to think, there arises a second and far more dangerous temptation. It is not despair. It is haste. Haste is the enemy that costs most men 10, 20, and even 30 years of their lives after adversity. They believe the danger lies in delay, when in truth, the danger lies in rebuilding without direction. The human mind, once shaken, seeks immediate relief. It longs to escape discomfort, embarrassment, and uncertainty. They accept the first opportunity that promises stability, not because it is right, but because it is near. In doing so, they trade temporary discomfort for permanent misdirection. I have seen this habit ruin more lives than failure itself. Men who could have rebuilt wisely within months instead bound themselves to unchosen paths for decades. They said, "I must be practical," not knowing that fear was speaking through the word practicality. Fear always urges speed. Wisdom never does. The most expensive mistake a man can make after collapse is to rebuild in the same state of mind that produced the collapse. If fear, drift, or borrowed purpose governed before, they will govern again only now with greater force. Nature is relentless in this regard. She does not permit a lesson to be skipped. If misunderstood once, it returns in stronger form. I studied one man who lost his position during an economic downturn. Ashamed of the loss, he rushed into another occupation, unrelated to his abilities or aims. He told himself he would return to his true work later. Years passed. Responsibilities accumulated. Habit hardened. What was meant to be temporary became permanent. He did not fail again because he was unlucky. He failed because he never stopped drifting. Contrast this with another man whose collapse was equally severe. He, too, felt pressure to act at once. Yet he resisted it. He chose instead to examine his thinking, his desires, and his aim. He asked himself one question and refused to act until it was answered. What do I want my life to stand for? That question saved him 20 years. When he returned to action, he did so deliberately, and every step thereafter compounded in value. Men are often praised for quick recovery, yet speed without direction is merely drift in motion. True recovery is measured not by how fast one moves, but by how soundly one builds. The man who rebuilds from fear may appear active, yet his activity is scattered. The man who rebuilds from purpose may appear slow, yet his progress is relentless. This is the moment when the concept of a definite chief aim becomes not a theory, but a necessity. Without a clearly defined purpose, collapse will repeat itself in new forms. With it, collapse becomes impossible to sustain. A man with an aim may be delayed, but he cannot be defeated. I have found that nearly all men who suffer repeated collapse have one thing in common. They never paused long enough to decide what they wanted most. They allowed circumstances, relatives, employers, and fears to choose for them. Such men are governed by opinion rather than intention, and opinion is always unstable. When a man emerges from collapse with a clear aim, others perceive the change immediately. His speech becomes measured. He no longer apologizes for his direction. He does not rush to explain himself. This quiet certainty commands respect even before results appear. People are drawn to those who know where they are going. One of the most revealing signs of fear-based rebuilding is the constant need to justify decisions. The man who acts from purpose feels no such need. He is willing to let time speak for him. This patience, misunderstood by the hurried, is in fact confidence. It is here that many men lose decades. They say, "I will think later," not knowing that later rarely comes. Habit hardens quickly. What is done in fear today becomes the prison of tomorrow. The man who postpones thought postpones freedom. I have advised countless men at this juncture to delay action long enough to gain clarity. Even when delay feels dangerous, I remind them that no action is truly safe unless it is guided. Action taken to escape, fear always multiplies fear. At this stage, disciplined autosuggestion becomes essential. The mind must be held steady while appearances shout urgency. One useful declaration is this: I act only from definite purpose. Repeated daily, This statement checks impulsive decision and restores control. Another is, I choose my direction deliberately. These words, impressed upon the subconscious, counteract the pull of haste. The man who resists fear-driven rebuilding begins to notice a change within himself. Anxiety diminishes, thought clarifies, possibilities previously unseen come into view. This is not imagination. It is perception restored. Fear blinds, calm reveals. Others, too, respond differently. They may not understand the delay, but they sense strength in it. Opportunities of higher quality begin to appear. People of influence are drawn to those who think before they act. Cooperation seeks clarity. This is how years are saved. Not through luck, not through struggle, but through refusal to drift again. The man who pauses here, who insists upon purpose before action, compresses experience that would otherwise take decades. Collapse was the first lesson. This is the second. The first removed illusion. The second demands decision. If this moment is honored, life begins to rebuild itself on a foundation that will not fail. If it is rushed, collapse returns often harsher than before. Therefore, do not mistake speed for wisdom. Do not accept movement as progress. Decide first. Act later. For a single well-chosen direction can save 20 years of wandering, while one fearful decision can cost the same. This is the turning point most men miss. When a man has resisted the impulse to rebuild in haste and has begun to search for direction, he discovers a truth which few ever fully grasp. The real rebuilding of life does not begin with circumstances, but with thought. Circumstances are effects. Thought is cause. Until this relationship is clearly understood and deliberately practiced, collapse will repeat itself in new forms, regardless of outward success. I have said many times that a man's only unquestioned possession is the power to control his own mind. Everything else, position, money, reputation, opportunity may be taken from him. But the man who retains control of his thinking retains control of his destiny. Collapse strips away illusion until this fact stands exposed. The question is whether the man will use it. Most people allow their thinking to be governed by habit, emotion, and suggestion from the outside world. Fear, particularly, is a master hypnotist. When fear enters the mind, it paralyzes reason, distorts judgment, and magnifies obstacles until they appear insurmountable. A man thinking under fear cannot rebuild wisely, no matter how intelligent he may be. This is why the discipline of controlled thought is not optional at this stage. It is essential. The man who does not deliberately choose his thoughts will have them chosen for him by circumstance, rumor, memory, and anxiety. Such a man remains a victim, even if his circumstances improve. I have studied men who emerged from complete ruin to positions of influence and power. Without exception, they learned to govern their emotional reactions during adversity. They refused to dwell upon loss. They refused to rehearse failure. They refused to speak of defeat as final. This discipline alone set them apart from the masses who remained trapped by circumstance. One man whom I knew lost everything he possessed before the age of 40. For a time, bitterness tempted him, yet he recognized that bitterness was only another form of surrender. He resolved instead to discipline his thinking. Each day, he devoted time to deliberate thought, directing his mind toward what he wished to become rather than what he had lost. Within a few years, he rebuilt a fortune greater than the first. But more importantly, he rebuilt mastery over himself. That mastery remained when money came and went. The average person under collapse allows fear to dominate thought. Fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of the future. These fears operate unconsciously, shaping decisions before reason has a chance to speak. The disciplined thinker reverses this process. He recognizes fear as a signal, not a command. He pauses. He examines. He replaces fear with faith. Faith, in this sense, is not blind belief. It is confidence in the law of cause and effect. It is the understanding that thought consistently held and emotionally charged becomes reality. This is not speculation. It is observation confirmed by countless lives. When a man learns to govern his thinking, others sense the change immediately. His voice steadies. His movements become deliberate. He no longer reacts impulsively. This shift alone often restores opportunities without effort. Autosuggestion is the instrument through which this discipline is established. The subconscious mind accepts repetition as truth, whether the suggestion is fear or faith. Most men use autosuggestion unconsciously, repeating words of doubt, failure, and limitation. The disciplined thinker uses it deliberately. Statements such as, "I am guided by intelligence greater than my own," or "I think only thoughts that serve my definite purpose," are not mere phrases. When repeated daily with conviction, they reorganize the subconscious mind. They replace chaos with order. They quiet fear and strengthen decision. I have observed that men who practice this discipline during collapse shorten their recovery dramatically. While others wander for years, these men regain direction within months. They do not escape adversity. They master it. It must be understood that controlled thought does not remove difficulty at once. It removes confusion first. Confusion is the true enemy. Once confusion is eliminated, difficulty becomes manageable. Many obstacles disappear altogether when approached with clarity. There is a marked difference between the man who thinks under discipline and the man who thinks under pressure. The first sees opportunity where the second sees threat. The first attracts cooperation. The second repels it. This difference alone accounts for the wide divergence in outcomes following collapse. People are instinctively drawn to those who demonstrate mental control. They trust them. They confide in them. They offer assistance without being asked. This is not chance. It is the natural response to order. At this stage, the man who has learned to govern his thinking begins to rebuild his life without strain. He does not chase opportunity. He prepares for it. He does not force alliances. He attracts them. He moves steadily, without drama. This discipline saves years because it eliminates trial and error. The average man learns through repeated mistakes. The disciplined thinker learns through observation and adjustment. He makes fewer errors because he thinks before acting. Many people believe that collapse weakens a man. In truth, it weakens only those who refuse to think. To the man who disciplines his mind, collapse becomes training. It sharpens perception. It clarifies desire. It removes excess. I often remind men at this stage that thinking is work. It requires effort, patience, and courage. Yet no work yields greater return. 1 hour of disciplined thought can save years of confused action. Therefore, if life has broken down around you, do not waste the moment by surrendering control of your mind. Claim it, train it, direct it. For the man who learns to master his thoughts during adversity builds a foundation that no collapse can destroy, and in doing so, he redeems time that others spend wandering. This is the quiet discipline that separates those who rise quickly from those who struggle for decades. When a man has learned to govern his thinking and has freed himself from the twin enemies of haste and fear, he enters a stage of rebuilding that few ever reach. This stage is not marked by dramatic effort, but by quiet certainty. He no longer feels driven to prove himself. He no longer rushes to restore appearances. He builds from understanding, and what is built from understanding endures. At this point, life begins to respond differently. Opportunities appear that would have been invisible to the drifting mind. People of quality are drawn to him without solicitation. Circumstances arrange themselves with less friction. This is not fortune. It is the natural effect of ordered thought acting upon an intelligent universe. I have observed that men who rebuild wisely after collapse often advance more rapidly than those who never fell at all. Why? Because they have been forced to think. They have learned lessons that comfort never teaches. They have stripped their philosophy of illusion and replaced it with principle. Such men no longer fear adversity. They recognize it as a signal rather than a sentence. They know that difficulty often precedes growth, and they meet it with analysis instead of alarm. This alone saves them years of emotional waste. There is a quality that develops in a man who has passed through collapse with understanding. It is self-reliance, not the reckless kind, but the thoughtful kind. He trusts his judgment because it has been tested. He trusts his ability to adapt because he has proven it. This confidence cannot be feigned, and others sense it immediately. They are willing to follow his lead. Leadership emerges naturally from inner order. One does not demand it. One earns it through mastery of self. I have seen men who, after losing everything, rebuilt fortunes greater than those they lost, not because they pursued wealth blindly, but because they pursued purpose intelligently. They did not chase money. They organized their efforts around service, value, and direction. Wealth followed as a byproduct. This is the great truth most people never learn. Success is not something one pursues directly. It is something that follows a man who knows where he is going and why. Collapse, properly interpreted, forces this knowledge into view. When rebuilding is guided by a definite chief aim, time begins to compress. Actions compound instead of scatter. Each decision strengthens the next. What once required struggle now unfolds with cooperation. I have seen men accomplish in 5 years what had eluded them for 20, simply because they ceased drifting and began directing. They did not work harder than before. They worked with clarity. Clarity is the great time saver of life. At this stage, persistence takes on a new character. It is no longer stubborn resistance, but intelligent endurance. The man persists not because he is desperate. Delays do not anger him. They refine his method. One may say that such a man has learned the art of turning adversity into advantage. This is not talent. It is training. It is the result of disciplined thought applied consistently over time. Autosuggestion continues to play a role, not as a remedy for fear, but as reinforcement of purpose. Statements such as, "I master myself, therefore I master circumstances, and I transform defeat into stepping stones," are not repeated in desperation, but in quiet conviction. They serve as anchors, keeping the mind aligned with its aim. Others observing this man often remark that he seems fortunate, that things work out for him. They do not see the years he saved by refusing to rebuild blindly. They do not see the hours of thought that replaced years of error. They see only the effect, not the cause. This is how collapse becomes the greatest economy of life. It condenses experience. It eliminates waste. It forces decisions that comfort postpones. A man who understands this truth does not curse adversity, he minds it. I have often said that the difference between those who succeed greatly and those who fail repeatedly is not intelligence, nor opportunity, nor even effort. It is philosophy. A sound philosophy of life transforms every experience into instruction. A poor philosophy turns instruction into punishment. Collapse, then, is the testing ground of philosophy. It reveals what a man truly believes about himself, about life, and about his power to think. If he believes circumstances govern him, he submits. If he believes thought governs circumstance, he rises. The man who rises does so steadily, not dramatically. His life gains coherence. His efforts align, his fears diminish. He becomes, in time, a person others rely upon in moments of uncertainty. This is the ultimate reward of understanding collapse. Not wealth alone, nor position alone, but authority over oneself, which is the only authority that endures. Therefore, if life has broken down around you, do not regard it as a tragedy. Regard it as a summons to think, to decide, to direct. If you answer that summons now, with patience and discipline, you may save not only 10 years of wandering, but 20, or even 30. You may accomplish in a fraction of a lifetime what others never reach at all. And when drift ends, mastery begins. This is the law. When a man reaches the end of instruction, there is a temptation to look outward once more and ask what remains to be done. Yet the real question at this point is not what to do, but what has been understood. For understanding, once achieved, governs action without effort. It becomes the silent guide behind every decision, every reaction, every ambition. If you have followed this teaching with attention, something subtle but decisive has already taken place within you. You may not yet see changes in circumstance, but you will notice changes in your responses. You will find that you no longer react as quickly to fear, no longer feel compelled to act merely to escape discomfort. This is the first sign that drift has lost its authority over you. I have learned, through long observation, that men do not fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they lack a governing philosophy. When adversity comes, that philosophy is exposed. Some discover they have none at all. Others discover it was borrowed from parents, from circumstance, from fear. Collapse removes these borrowed structures so that a man may choose his own. This is why adversity, though feared, is often the greatest economy of life. It compresses years of wandering into a single decisive moment. It forces questions that comfort postpones indefinitely. If those questions are answered honestly, time is redeemed. If they are ignored, time is squandered. You must understand that nature is indifferent to wishes, but responsive to law. She does not ask whether you are ready to learn. She presents the lesson when the moment arrives. Collapse is such a lesson. It does not arrive to destroy, but to demand clarity. Many men, after collapse, spend years trying to restore what was lost, not knowing that what was lost was never the source of their strength. They chase conditions, titles, and arrangements, believing that safety lies there. In doing so, they remain bound to the very thinking that failed them. The man who has learned this lesson does not chase. He prepares. He does not hurry. He decides. He understands that conditions are effects, and effects cannot be controlled at their level. Only causes may be governed. This understanding produces a new quality of patience, not the patience of resignation, but the patience of confidence. The man who knows where he is going is never disturbed by delay. He uses delay to refine method, strengthen faith, and sharpen perception. I have observed that men who possess this patience are often misunderstood. Others mistake their calm for indifference, their deliberation for hesitation, yet time reveals the truth. While the hurried exhaust themselves, the deliberate advance steadily. While others change direction repeatedly, the man of purpose compounds effort. This is how years are saved, not by working harder, but by working from clarity, not by chasing opportunity, but by attracting it through readiness. You may now see why collapse was necessary. It removed what distracted you. It silenced noise. It stripped away borrowed confidence and replaced it with the possibility of earned self-reliance. This replacement is invaluable. Self-reliance, properly understood, is not isolation. It is alignment. It is the knowledge that you are governed from within, rather than driven from without. When a man reaches this state, he is no longer at the mercy of opinion, panic, or circumstance. Others sense this change at once. They may not know its cause, but they trust its effect. They feel steadied in the presence of one who is not ruled by fear. They seek counsel from those who have mastered themselves. This is why men who have passed through adversity wisely often become leaders without seeking leadership. Authority flows naturally from self-mastery. Influence follows inner order. I have often said that the greatest service a man can render is to demonstrate that adversity need not defeat. When others see a man rise calmly from collapse, they gain courage to face their own difficulties. In this way, one man's understanding multiplies beyond himself. It is important now to guard against one final error, the belief that this understanding is complete. Truth is not static. It must be lived daily. Each new challenge invites the same principles to be applied at a higher level. Yet you will find that each application grows easier. What once required effort becomes instinctive. The mind trained to think no longer fears thinking. It welcomes it. Your words, too, will change. You will speak less of fear and more of purpose, less of obstacles and more of direction. Speech reflects thought, and thought reflects belief. When belief changes, everything follows. You may find it useful, as you move forward, to remind yourself often of certain truths, not as wishes, but as confirmations. Say quietly, when doubt attempts to return, I refuse to drift. I choose to think. Say also, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. These statements steady the mind and restore perspective. Remember that time lost through misunderstanding cannot be reclaimed, but time saved through understanding compounds endlessly. A single year lived with purpose outweighs a decade lived in confusion. If you are tempted to regret the years already spent, dismiss the thought at once. Regret is only another form of drift. From this moment forward, life need not repeat itself. I have known men who awakened late in life to these principles and yet accomplished more in a few years than others did in a lifetime. Time is elastic when thought is directed. Direction accelerates progress. You are no longer required to fear collapse, for you now understand its meaning. You know that it is not an ending, but a signal, not a curse, but a correction, not a loss, but a redirection. This knowledge alone places you among a small minority. Most men live and die without ever understanding why life unfolded as it did. They remain victims of circumstance because they never claimed mastery of thought. You have been shown another way. Carry this understanding quietly. Do not preach it. Live it. Let your decisions reflect it. Let your calm demonstrate it. Let your progress confirm it. When future uncertainty arises, as it will, return to first principles. Ask not, how do I escape this? But what does this require me to understand? That single question will keep you aligned. In closing, I say this without exaggeration. The man who understands collapse saves not only time, but life itself. He redeems effort, restores dignity, and recovers direction. For collapse ends drift, and when drift ends, purpose begins. And when purpose begins, time obeys. This is the final lesson. There comes a moment, after instruction has been given and reflection has begun, when a man must decide whether knowledge will remain an idea or become a rule by which he lives. This moment is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, often when no one is watching, and it asks only one thing: will you govern yourself, or will you return to drift? Most men imagine that great decisions are made in public, accompanied by bold declarations and visible action. In truth, the decisions that shape a lifetime are made alone, in silence, when a man chooses how he will think, when fear no longer has an audience. Collapse creates such moments. It strips away distraction and leaves a man face to face with his own habits of thought. I have spent my life studying men who succeeded far beyond the ordinary, and I have found that they all shared one trait, which outweighed talent, education, or opportunity. They accepted full responsibility for the direction of their lives. They did not blame circumstances, nor did they credit luck. They understood that every condition was the result of causes set in motion by thought, decision, and persistence. This understanding marks the true end of collapse. Collapse does not end when conditions improve. It ends when responsibility is claimed. Until then, a man may recover outwardly while remaining defeated inwardly. When responsibility is accepted, recovery becomes permanent. It is easy to say, "I will take responsibility," while still hoping circumstances will change first. That hope is another form of drift. Responsibility means acting from principle even when results are not yet visible. It means choosing thought deliberately, even when emotion urges reaction. It means refusing to surrender the mind to fear, regardless of appearances. Many men, after adversity, adopt the language of wisdom without its discipline. They speak of faith, patience, and purpose, yet return quickly to old habits under pressure. This is why their progress halts. Knowledge without application is merely decoration for the intellect. The man who truly saves time does so by shortening the distance between understanding and action. He does not wait for certainty before deciding. He creates certainty by deciding. This does not mean reckless action. It means commitment to a chosen philosophy of life. Time is the most misunderstood element in human experience. Men complain of its scarcity while wasting it unconsciously. They believe years slip away because life is cruel, when in truth, years are consumed by indecision, reaction, and repetition of error. Collapse exposes this waste sharply. It offers a chance to correct it. I have known men who, once awakened by adversity, reorganized their lives with such precision that they advanced in 5 years more than they had in the previous 20. They did not work harder. They worked from clarity. Clarity eliminates waste as surely as fire consumes dross. When a man understands that every decision either saves time or costs it, his thinking becomes disciplined. He no longer chooses merely what feels comfortable, popular, or safe. He chooses what aligns with his aim. This single shift alters the course of a lifetime. Others notice this change almost immediately. The man who has stopped drifting no longer seeks approval. He listens more than he speaks. He weighs words before using them. His presence conveys seriousness without severity. People trust him, not because he demands it, but because his mind is ordered. Such a man is not immune to difficulty. He still encounters obstacles, delay, and disappointment. The difference lies in his response. He no longer wastes energy resisting what is. He studies it. He extracts its lesson. He adjusts his course without self-condemnation. This habit alone saves years. The average man repeats the same mistake under different names, believing himself unlucky. The disciplined man recognizes pattern and corrects it at the root. You must understand that life does not require perfection, only direction. Errors made in pursuit of a definite aim are quickly corrected. Errors made in drift repeat endlessly. Collapse often occurs to interrupt repetition. When a man grasps this truth, fear of error diminishes. He becomes willing to decide. Indecision, more than wrong decision, is the great thief of time. It paralyzes initiative and invites circumstance to choose in one's place. The moment you decide upon a governing philosophy, circumstances begin to reorganize, not magically, but logically. Thought influences action. Action influences habit. Habit influences character. Character influences destiny. This chain is unbreakable. Many people search for destiny as though it were hidden from them. Destiny is revealed the moment a man commits to govern his thinking and align it with purpose. From that point forward, life responds. This is why collapse, though painful, is often the most honest moment of a man's life. It removes pretense, it silences excuses, it demands choice. Those who answer that demand save years. Those who evade it pay dearly in repetition. You may be tempted, after hearing these truths, to wait for the right time to apply them. There is no such time. There is only the present moment. Drift always promises a better moment later. Purpose acts now. If doubt arises, return to fundamentals. Ask yourself whether your thinking is deliberate or reactive. Ask whether your decisions are guided by aim or by fear. These questions, asked honestly, will keep you aligned. I advise men to guard their mental independence as they would guard their health. Do not permit the opinions, fears, and doubts of others to occupy your mind. Most people speak from habit, not understanding. To follow them blindly is to borrow their limitations. The man who masters himself becomes an example whether he intends it or not. Others watch his composure. They note his steadiness under pressure. They seek his counsel when their own thinking becomes confused. Leadership, in its truest form, is quiet. As you move forward, remember that collapse did not come to defeat you. It came to awaken you. It forced you to examine your philosophy, your habits, and your direction. That examination, once made, need not be repeated. From this point on, life will test you differently. It will no longer test your endurance of chaos, but your faithfulness to order. It will no longer ask whether you can survive difficulty, but whether you can maintain clarity amid success. These are better tests. In closing, I remind you of this simple truth, confirmed by every life I have studied. The man who learns to think accurately redeems time. He compresses experience. He escapes repetition. He lives deliberately. Collapse, properly understood, is the great teacher that ends wasted years. And when wasted years end, life begins. There is a stage in every man's education which cannot be taught by books, mentors, or experience borrowed from others. It is the stage at which knowledge ceases to be something heard and becomes something obeyed. Many reach this point and hesitate. Few cross it. Collapse often brings a man to this very threshold, and what he does there determines not merely his next step, but the pattern of his remaining years. I have observed that most men do not consciously choose the direction of their lives. They fall into it through habit. They wake each day thinking the same thoughts, reacting in the same manner, and making decisions from the same emotional patterns. Time passes. Results accumulate. They call this fate, when it is nothing more than repetition. Collapse interrupts repetition. It breaks the rhythm of habit. It creates a pause in which choice becomes possible. That pause is brief. If it is not used deliberately, habit reasserts itself, often with greater force than before. This is why so many men experience collapse more than once. They change circumstances, but not patterns. The man who truly benefits from collapse uses it to recondition his habits of thought. He understands that circumstances are only the outer shell of inner discipline. He does not attempt to rebuild life while thinking as he did before. He recognizes that to do so would be to recreate the same results under new names. At this point, the subconscious mind becomes the central factor. Few understand its role, yet it governs nearly all human behavior. It accepts whatever the conscious mind repeatedly impresses upon it. If fear, doubt, and indecision are impressed, it faithfully produces conditions to match. If faith, purpose, and persistence are impressed, it produces opportunity, clarity, and cooperation. Collapse reveals what has been impressed upon the subconscious up to this moment. The man who studies his reactions during adversity learns more about himself than years of success could ever teach. He discovers what thoughts rise first, what fears dominate, what beliefs control him. This knowledge is priceless, for it shows exactly what must be changed. Most men flee from this discovery. They distract themselves with activity. They seek noise to avoid hearing their own thinking. In doing so, they surrender the very advantage collapse provides. The disciplined man does the opposite. He observes himself without condemnation. He studies his impulses. He takes inventory. This inventory is the beginning of mastery. Until a man knows what governs him, he cannot govern himself. Once he knows, control becomes possible. I have seen men who, after collapse, consciously reprogrammed their thinking through deliberate autosuggestion. They did not rely on enthusiasm or willpower alone. They understood that repetition is the language of the subconscious mind. Each day, at fixed times, they impressed upon themselves thoughts of purpose, confidence, and direction. In time, these thoughts replaced fear as the dominant habit. This practice does not produce instant miracles. It produces something far more valuable: consistency. Consistency of thought produces consistency of action. Character produces destiny. The man who changes his habits of thought after collapse changes the trajectory of his life permanently. He does not merely recover, he advances. He does not merely avoid failure, he grows beyond it. Others begin to sense this change long before visible success appears. They notice that he no longer complains. He no longer explains himself unnecessarily. He no longer reacts sharply to uncertainty. His composure communicates confidence, and confidence invites trust. It is a curious fact that men who master their inner habits often find assistance coming from unexpected quarters. Old rivals become allies. New acquaintances appear at precisely the right moment. Opportunities arrive that could not have been planned. These are not accidents. They are the natural response of life to ordered thought. The average man attributes such events to luck. The disciplined man knows better. He understands that his thinking has altered the field in which he moves. Order attracts order. Confidence attracts cooperation. Time, too, begins to behave differently. The man who once felt pursued by time now finds it abundant. He no longer wastes it in indecision, regret, or emotional conflict. Each day serves a purpose. Each effort contributes. Progress accelerates. This is how collapse saves decades. It forces the abandonment of inefficient habits. It exposes waste. It demands economy of thought. A man who accepts this demand gains back what others lose unconsciously. Many people believe that destiny is fixed by circumstance or birth. My studies have convinced me otherwise. Destiny is shaped by habit. Habit is shaped by thought. Thought is shaped by choice. Collapse restores choice to a man who had surrendered it unknowingly. There is a moment, after collapse, when the mind attempts to return to old comforts. It whispers that change is exhausting, that discipline is unnecessary, that things will work out on their own. This voice must be recognized for what it is: the inertia of habit. If obeyed, it restores drift. If resisted, it fades. The man who resists this pull establishes a new normal. What once felt unnatural, calm thinking, deliberate decision, patient action becomes natural. What once felt natural, panic, reaction, haste feels foreign. At that point, collapse has completed its work. I have known men who reached this state and said, "I would not relive the collapse, but I would not erase what it taught me." They understood that the pain was temporary, but the correction was permanent. It is important to note that success following collapse often arrives quietly. There may be no sudden recognition, no public vindication. Instead, there is steady progress, increasing confidence, and growing influence. This kind of success endures because it is rooted in habit, not circumstance. Others may still measure success by outward symbols. You will measure it by control of thought, control of emotion. This is the only success that cannot be taken from you. If at any time you feel uncertain again, return to the basics. Examine your habits of thought. Ask whether fear or purpose is being impressed upon your subconscious. Adjust accordingly. This practice keeps collapse from repeating itself. Remember that the subconscious mind does not argue, it obeys. Be careful, therefore, what you command it to build. I often remind men that no life ever truly changes until the inner habits change. External reform without internal discipline is temporary. Internal discipline produces lasting transformation. You have now been shown how collapse works, why it occurs, and how it may be used. Whether it becomes a loss or a liberation depends entirely upon your willingness to change what you think about, dwell upon, and repeatedly affirm. This is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. If you choose discipline, collapse becomes the most valuable teacher you will ever encounter. If you choose comfort, it becomes a recurring visitor. Stand, therefore, at this point with full awareness. Do not hurry past it. Do not numb it. Use it. For the man who reforms his habits of thought at the moment of collapse does not merely rebuild his life, he redirects it. And in that redirection, years are saved, effort is redeemed, and destiny is reclaimed.